Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In this video, I will keep explaining about agile methods, and I will start with one approach, which is extreme programming. And I think it is the best known and mostly wide used agile methods. And from its name, extreme, which means there should be an extreme approach to iterative development. Like a new version may be built several times per day. And in extreme programming, there's a due date, which is every 2 weeks. The development team should deliver a working software to the customers. So there's like here there's extreme date, which is 2 weeks. Every 14 days, the development team should deliver a working software to customers, and all tests must be run for every build. And I think at the end of this chapter I will explain the testing technique that is used on extreme programming approach. Extreme programming and agile principles. I think in the previous video I talked about main principles of agile methods, and here you can tell these principles are similar to the agile methods. Of course it's similar because XP is one approach of agile methods. Incremental development is supported through small frequent system releases, and as I said earlier, like every 2 weeks the development team should deliver a working software. So the software is gonna be built on multi increments, and each increment contains one or more features that should be ready for customers. The second one is customer involvement, and I said that like one characteristics of agile methods is the customer involvement, which means a customer should be in the development team. People, not to process through pair programming. Here we use a technique called pair programming, which is two programmers working on the same workstation or computer, which means there's gonna be a collective ownership and a process that avoids long working hours. Change supported, and extreme programming cope with changes through regular system releases, and maintaining simplicity through constant refactoring of code. Of course, on extreme programming, they try to make the software simple, specifically on the coding. They need to refine the code continuously in order to make it easy to read, easy to change. This is the cycle of extreme programming. I think it starts from select user story for this release. This is gonna be delivered by customers. The customers are responsible to give the requirements as a user story. Then we break down stories to tasks. Then plan release, develop, integrate this software. As you can see, these processes considered as one process. Then we need to release the software, and then we need to evaluate the system. After evaluation, we go to the next release or next increment, and we still cycling through the process until we finish the whole software. Extreme programming practices. These are the practices. You can tell some of them are principles as well. Incremental planning. Here requirements are recorded on story cards, and the stories to be included in a release are determined by the time available and their relative priority. Here the store, like the customers, they're gonna give the requirements as a story. These stories should be written on the card, and they have the responsibility as well to give priority for each requirement. And on extreme programming, the development should be done on small releases, which means every release should contain at least a minimum useful set of functionality, which means that it provides a business value. Simple design. On extreme programming, we design software or increment in a such simple way, and there's a principle called KISS principle, KIS, which is keep it simple. Don't plan for a future. Don't put troubles. Just design according to the requirement. Don't design for a future, which means here enough design is carried out to meet the current requirements and no more. And in agile methodology, there's an approach called test phase development. We know that we test after programming or writing source code. Here in the test phase development, we write tests before start programming. We write tests for a new piece of functionality before the functionality itself is implemented. And the final one is refactoring, which means we need to refactor the code in order to refinement. All developers are expected to refactor the code continuously as soon as possible for code improvements. This keeps the code simple and maintainable. For example, just give a good name for classes, good name for attributes and methods. Break the complex basic block into other blocks and so on, in order just to keep the code more simple and easy to understand. Pair programming. Pair programming means two developers are working together on the same workstation or on the same computer. One is gonna be work as a driver, which write the source code, and another one is gonna observe and monitor his or her work. Collective ownership. The pairs of developers work on all areas of the system so that no island of expertise develop, and all the developers take responsibility for all of the code, which means anyone can change anything. There's no specific developers or specific team member responsible about certain task. It's gonna be we, not I. Continuous integration. Integrations here is very important because the work is gonna be delivered on releases or increments, so we need to integrate all these increments together. As soon as the work on a task is complete, it is integrated into the whole system. After any such integration, all the unit tests in the system must pass. Sustainable pace, which means large amounts of overtime are not considered acceptable, as the net effect is often to reduce code quality and medium-term productivity. And on-site customers, which means the customer involvement here. a representative of the end user of the system, the customer should be available full time for the use of the extreme programming team. And I said that the customer is a member of the development team and is responsible for bringing system requirements and to do acceptance test. Requirement scenarios. In extreme programming, a customer or user is part of the extreme programming team and is responsible for making decision requirements, which means the customers are responsible for delivering the requirements and give prioritization for these requirements. The requirements are expressed as a scenario, or called user stories. These requirements are written on a cards, and the development team break them down into implementation tasks. These tasks are the basis for schedule and cost estimates. We depend on the task in order to evaluate and to plan for the increment. The customer chooses the stories for inclusion in the next release based on their priorities and the schedule estimates. Like here, we need to make sure that the customers are responsible for giving the requirements as user stories and make prioritization on these requirements. And the customers are the one who decide which increments should be included in each release. Extreme programming and change. I think in traditional way, like we think about the future, right? Or we design for change. In extreme programming, we don't give attention to the future or what is gonna happen. Just we design on the current case. That's why we keep the design simple. And we focus on refactoring in order to make the code simple to understand and clear, which as a result make changes more easy when they are required. Refactoring here, programming team look for possible software improvement and make these improvements even where there is no immediate need for them. We need to look for any ambiguity on the code, on the source code, and try to clear it. For example, if there's a name for any given method or attributes or a class or object and the name is not a meaning to that attribute, so we can rename it. If there's like a complex code and it's not easy to understand, we can break it down into basic blocks. And refactoring improves the understandability of the system, of the software, and reduces the need for documentation. And when we make the code more easy to understand, so it helps us to change it and to adapt the changes when are required. But sometimes refactoring needs to redesign the whole system, and this is more expensive. We don't support it. And this is example of refactoring. such as reorganization of class hierarchy to remove duplicate code, or renaming attributes and method, uh, or replacement of inline code with calls or methods that have been included in the program library. There are many types of refactoring, such as inline, extract method, inline method, extract class, and so on. Testing in extreme programming. Testing is central to extreme programming, and extreme programming has developed an approach where the program is tested after every change has been made. There are many testing features on extreme programming. The first one is test-first development. Incremental test development from scenarios, user involvement, which is gonna be carried by the customers, and automated test harnesses are used to run all component tests each time that a new release is built. Test-first development means we need to write a test before coding. So we write a test and we write a code to make this test pass. Here is it. Test-first development. Writing tests before code clarifies the requirement to be implemented. Tests are written as program rather than data, so that they can be executed automatically. The test includes a check that it has executed correctly. And here we write a test as a source code. That's why we need a framework for that. There are multi-frameworks. For example, JUnit is a framework that is used on Java. There's code and unit used for .NET programming language, such as C#. So all previous and new tests are run automatically when a new functionality is added. So checking that the new functionality has not introduced errors, and this is called regression testing. Regression test means we need to test after modifications are made in order to make sure that these modifications didn't produce any error on the previous working software. Customer involvement. The role of the customer in the testing process is to help develop acceptance tests for the story that are to be implemented in the next release of the system. Customers are responsible to give the requirements. In addition, they are responsible in order to accept the work that is done by the development team. The customer who is part of the team writes a test as development proceeds. All new code is therefore validated to ensure that it is what the customer needs. But there's like some, let's say, some weaknesses, such as people adopting the customer role have limited time available and so cannot work full time with the development team, or might be they may feel that providing the requirement was enough of a contribution, and so maybe reluctant on to get involved in the testing process. Pair programming. Pair programming means that two programmers are working on the same computer or workstation. One is going to be work as the driver who writes the code, and the another one is going to be the observer who observes what the driver writes. Pair programming is very helpful because at least each line of code is gonna be looked by two, the observer and the driver. And pair programming support the ownership of code, and spreads the knowledge across the team. And the pairs, they're gonna be the build experience, and they can learn from each other. And pair programming encourages refactoring because they can support each one. And measurements suggest that development productivity with pair programming is similar to that of two people working independently, which means here that the productivity is not affected if two programmers working on the same workstation or if each one works in separate. In pair programming, programmers sit together at the same workstation to develop the software. Pairs are created dynamically so that all team members work with each other during the development process. Pairs can be done in many different ways. For example, according to the task level, programmer level, and so on. The sharing of knowledge that happens during pair programming is very important, as it reduces the overall risk to project when team members leave. Yeah, pair programming is not necessarily inefficient, and there's evidence that a pair working together is more efficient than two programmers working separately. The advantages of pair programming: it supports the idea of collective ownership and responsibility for the system, which means individuals are not held responsible for problems with the code. Instead, the team has collective responsibility for resolving these problems, which means there is no specific person who is responsible or carry out the responsibility to solve any image problems. Pair programming acts as informal review process because each line of code is looked at least by two people, the pair, and it helps support refactoring, which is a process of software improvement, where pair programming and collective ownership are used. Others benefit immediately from the refactoring, so they are likely to support the process. Agile project management. The main job of managers on Agile methodology is to manage the project so the software is delivered on time and within the planned budget for the project. The standard approach to project management is plan-driven, where the managers draw up a plan for the project showing what should be delivered, when it should be delivered, and who will work on the development of the project deliverables. So the Agile project management requires a different approach, which is adapted to incremental development and the particular strength of Agile methods.